Hi, my name is Taylor Sprates, and today I'll be speaking about the multiple subject standard intern lesson plan. At first glance, when I look at the lesson plan, I see many of the things I'm familiar with from other lesson plans, including the opening, the introduction, the guided practice, the independent practice, the closing. All those things make me confident that I can go ahead and tackle this lesson plan. But then looking further, there are a few things that I have never seen before that caught me off guard and kind of raised an eyebrow a little bit. One of them was the differentiation aspect of the lesson plan, and at first glance, I was a little bit confused because I had never seen anything like that on a lesson plan, so I did have to do a little bit more digging, and what I found was Kathy Wesley, she states that differentiation means that teaching the same material to all students using a variety of instructional strategies may be required. Basically, that teachers may need to design their lesson plans based on learning styles, abilities, student assessments, and any of that's going to allow for a supportive learning environment for students to start learning. So once I looked further into that, I understood a little bit more about it. I was able to understand that differentiation just means how can I teach students in a way where they can all learn the same subject without being the exact same process for every student, because not all students learn the same way, so there does need to be some differentiation within the instruction. So that was one thing I noticed that was a little bit different. And then another thing I noticed that was a little bit different was the reflection portion of it, which I had never seen on a lesson plan before, but I do think is important because reflecting on your lessons, reflecting on your teaching is always how we grow in our profession. So that was another thing on the lesson plan that I had never seen that I found very important and very interesting. And then a few of the elements that I find may be a challenge, one of them was the differentiation. Maybe it is because it's something new that I had never seen before, but it was a little bit like, how am I supposed to differentiate my lesson to create something that all students can learn? And so I did have to do a little bit more digging on that. And according to Carol Ann Tomlinson, there are a few ways that you can differentiate a lesson, using reading materials at varying levels, using vocabulary words at the readiness of students, having auditory and visual means, so not only the students who learn auditorily, but also the students who need a visual representation. And then meeting in small groups, and then if it's a lower group who are struggling on the idea or the lesson, you may need to reteach the lesson or the skill. And then if it's a higher advanced learners, and they understand the lesson fully, you may then extend the idea or skill to some of those learners. Something else that I found to be challenging in this is the standards. So in the future, sometimes I have, in the current day, I have had to make lesson plans in my current jobs, and I find sometimes that some lessons can be very broad, and I'm not exactly sure what to hit in those broad standards. So I find that maybe my lesson doesn't always match exactly what the standard is asking me for. Sometimes I have a hard time finding out what lessons go best with what standards. I really enjoy standards that say this is what we need to teach, this is what you need to hit on, and then it's very ABC versus mixture of colors. So I do find that the standards, finding the perfect standard for your lesson is a little bit difficult sometimes. Still something that I'm working on, something that I'm hoping to learn more about so I can improve on those skills. But it is something that I find a little bit more difficult. And then the last challenge that I can see on these is actually the reflection. As someone who likes to take time in creating their lesson plans, I feel very confident in my lesson plan by the end of it. And reflecting on it and making sure I'm hitting all the standards. Sometimes I do notice, maybe I'm developing this standard, but it's not quite like at level, or as they say, it's not quite at effective level. But as with that being said, I think that my lesson plans that I create are pretty drawn out strategically. And so I'm going to have a harder time telling myself that I haven't met a standard. So I'm hoping to be able to look at it. I'm hoping to look at my lesson plans objectively, and so that when I go to reflect on them, I'll be able to reflect objectively.